And we are going to record. So welcome all. My name is Chrissy. I am a DI alum and have been doing this for, oh geez, over 30 years at this point. So smattering of photos of me as a competitor. The second one here with the trophy is actually D2K, the very first DI global finals that happened. So been doing DI as long as it's existed in the current iteration. So my current role in Wisconsin DI, I am an affiliate challenge master for the engineering challenge. I also am on the committee and working to train all of our volunteers. So I train all the team managers and I also train all of our appraisers and officials and challenge masters. So know that all of the information that you're getting tonight is the same information that we train appraisers on. So we are really committed to consistency and transparency in Wisconsin DI, and we want you all to know how this is coming. But yeah, it's really fun. I'm also an international challenge master, so I'm the lead ICM for the engineering challenge worldwide as well. So been doing this a lot of years, been a challenge master for over 20. So happy to have you all here tonight. And with me helping co-pilot, we've got Michaela and Elliot. I don't know if you want to say hi or introduce yourselves.
Hi everyone, Michaela Becker. I am the co-affiliate director for Wisconsin Destination Imagination, and I'm also the regional director for the Northwest region, which is also where Minnesota is hanging out for the year. So thanks for
Thanks.
joining us.
Thanks, Michaela.
Hi everyone, Elliot Koss over here. I'm currently the board chair for Wisconsin Destination Imagination, and I love all things instant challenge, so I am one of our affiliate challenge masters for that this year as well.
So Elliot's going to keep me honest here when I talk about Instant Challenge. So all right, thank you all. So as we go, and thank you all for being here. We have no shortage of teams that want to do DI. Usually, our limiting factor is team managers. So we appreciate the work that you do throughout the season with your kids. We thank you for coming tonight to learn some more so that you can set your team up for success. And we really, truly appreciate everything that you do. You are a big part of what makes Wisconsin Destination Imagination and Minnesota Destination Imagination possible. So tonight I have goals. It's going to be all about the tournament. And as you prepare tournament, kind of thinking about those last minute things. So we're going to talk about breaking down a challenge. And as you go through the last weeks leading up to tournament, making sure that your team solutions are actually meeting the challenge and that you understand where the points are and as you're doing those last minute checks. We're also going to spend a lot of time walking through the tournament day itself. So, every appraiser team interaction that you can expect, so that you can come prepared and that you, as team managers, can talk to your teams about what to expect on tournament day and just kind of demystify that experience. So, we'll talk about timelines, we'll talk about what happens, we'll talk about what the appraisers are thinking about and doing to get you more information there. We're going to talk about paperwork, all your tournament data forms that you're going to submit, how to get that right. So, tips and tricks, what to do, what not to do, and just kind of walk you through that so that as you're filling that out, you feel like you're prepared. And then we're going to spend some time with a deep dive into scoring. So, I'm going to share the same rubrics that we train our appraisers on because I am all about transparency. And that way, I know as a team member, it was really an aha moment when I finally saw the rubrics. If you've looked at the travel guide for teams, you'll see a lot of that same information in there. But I think it's really important, right, for your teams to know how you're being evaluated and some things that the appraisers are looking at. So we'll look at that for Central Challenge and we'll look at that for Instant Challenge as well. We'll take some breaks along the way. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. Michaela and Elliot will be helping me monitor. And we are recording this, but if you've got a question, likely somebody else has it as well. So we'll keep going, and then at the end, we will stop the recording. And if anybody has any additional questions that you don't want memorialized in the recording, we can answer those at that time as well. So I think I've intentionally picked an old challenge and not anything that we're doing today, but just want to highlight some really important parts of the challenge to make sure that you're double checking all of this as you go and making sure that everybody's comfortable and knows what's going on. So we're going to use actually a sample challenge from the 21-22 season called Daring Escape. But you'll see the format may look a little bit different, but the sections are going to be what's important and still the same. So, one of the first things that it's always just a good double check is to make sure you know what your team budget is and what the time limit for your challenge is. And we'll talk a little bit more when we get to the tournament data form section about team budgets. But a team budget is essentially trying to have a level playing field for all teams. And so every team that's solving the challenge, could they solve the challenge with a budget not to exceed the amount of money that they had? So the value of your solution. And then your time limit. So really important, it's how much time do you have to complete your presentation? Usually it's 8 minutes. The improvisational challenge is a little bit different. That has like a 2 minute prep time and a 5 minute performance time. But make sure you're paying attention to that. That includes setup. So that's like a really important thing. So from the time you're in the launch area, your teams are going to have to pick up their stuff when they say begin and set it up and perform in that amount of time. So just some good double checks as you're getting to tournament and as you're practicing your presentations and your performances to make sure that you can do the setup and the presentation within that time limit. Scoring, another really important thing to focus on, especially as your limited time, right? Like, what do you have left? Where do you want to focus? Is kind of focusing on where the points are. As a general rule, the more points something is worth, the more time you should be spending as you prepare. So in our central challenge, I guess on the right here is kind of the representation of all 400 points. So 75% of your points are going to be that solution, that central challenge and team choice elements that you're going to work on ahead of time. And then 25% is going to be that instant challenge portion. So you still want to be practicing instant challenge as well, right? So that you know the process, you know what to expect when you get to that tournament. And then within that central challenge, so like just that purple block for this challenge that we're going to look at, you can see it's pretty well split. 36% on the story, 31% on hazards, 33% on daring devices. So, as you're looking at your own challenges, think about how that split is and make sure that you're dividing and making sure that your solution is solving everything that is going to be scored at the tournament. This page here, definitely recommend printing it out, having a copy at every single meeting, and going through and looking at this. This is a really good checklist to make sure you haven't forgotten anything as you're solving your challenges. This page is also really great because the description of each of these elements is what the appraisers see when they're scoring things. So this is how they're going to score everything. So making sure that you understand the distinguish, what is risk taking, what is technical design, technical innovation, all of those different things. And that as you're going through and practicing, that you make sure that you've got a solution and that as you're thinking about areas to maybe refine or add some things to and tweak and modify as you're going, you might want to focus more, look at where the points are as you look at the challenge as well. The more something is, those might be the areas that you want to spend a little bit more time on if you have to make choices. But like this challenge is pretty evenly split, actually. So like if I was a team working on this, you'd kind of want to evenly work on everything. There's not anything that's worth way more points than something else. But definitely take a look at that as part of your final tournament preparation. Now, also, as you're finalizing and making sure that all of your challenge solutions are meeting the requirements, things to pay attention to: the must, the mays, the must nots, and the should be's. So every section of the challenge, while that scoring page is a really good high-level checklist, it's also important to do another deep dive into each of those elements and look back into that challenge to make sure that what you're doing is meeting all of those requirements. So if it says that you must not do something, make sure that it doesn't do that. If it must do something, make sure that it does that. If it's things like may, it could, they may use it, but it's not as firm rules. But definitely make sure that you're looking at the challenge and looking at the solution and making sure that you're meeting those requirements so that you don't have any surprises on tournament day. As a team manager, it is absolutely not interference for you to bring this forward to your team and walk them through this. If there are questions about if you think something isn't meeting those requirements, definitely say, hey guys, let's look at this. Do you do this? Do you think it's doing that? Do you think it's not? Well, why is it doing that? How does this meet this challenge requirement? Why does it not? And really facilitate those conversations. Don't feel like you can have to sit back if you think that your team hasn't solved the challenge and isn't meeting one of those requirements, and just keep your mouth shut. And then, that you have a surprise on tournament day. Definitely, take some time, go through this as just double checks. Sometimes we have the best intentions, right, when we're idea generating early in the season and coming up with our solutions, but then things morph and they change and they modify, and what you end up with, you want to make sure is still ticking all of those boxes and doing what it's supposed to do. Another thing that's really important is to make sure you're paying attention to any tables in your challenges. Sometimes people can skim over diagrams and tables, but in DI, the tables and the pictures have requirements, and sometimes those tables are the only place that some of these things are defined. So make sure you're not just reading the words in the A.I.C's of the challenge, that you're looking at everything. Engineering, those diagrams are really important for the zones, things like that. Obviously, improv has tables. A lot of the challenges have tables, so definitely take a look at that. For your story, double check everything that you're working on. Things must include, may include, if it says that it has to be one character, for instance, that you are picking one and not all. You had to have a costume versus multiple costumes, that it's that singular and that you are meeting all of those requirements. Also, look for things that are integrated and have to be worked into other parts of your challenge and talk about how you're doing that. Things to think about with the story. Team choice elements. I always like to highlight that team choice elements are going to be evaluated in three ways: the creativity and originality, the quality, workmanship, and effort, and the integration in the presentation. As an appraiser, I have had seen team choice elements that have been incredibly detail oriented and well made and score incredibly high, for instance, on the quality and workmanship, but I give them incredibly low scores on the creativity and the integration because, say, they sewed a costume, but they bought a pattern, they didn't modify it anyway. They used, everybody's different. I also have a costume design background, so we're just gonna throw that out there, but just as an example, right? So if you did that, it could score incredibly high on the construction, but it wasn't very creative because somebody else designed the pattern. They used fabric that was exactly recommended and designed for that pattern. And maybe it wasn't well integrated because it wasn't really described. It was kind of thrown in there. So, like, for an example, right? Or you could have something that was super creative, right? And looked like it was a little scrappy around the edges and thrown together. So it might get a really high creativity score, but really low on the quality, workmanship, and effort. When I'm appraising, I'm definitely looking at how much effort does it look that a team member put into this. We can generally tell if it's something they did in a night. And I raise my hand as a team member that sometimes I know that happens. Or is it something that they worked on for a long time? And then that integration, and we're going to talk about integration rubrics when we get a little bit later on, but how well does that team choice element fit into your story and everything else that's happening? The team choice is great and fun because it really allows your team to pick anything that you want to be scored that's not already in a challenge. But we feel like it should still have a meaningful connection to the story and make sense with what's going on. So if somebody all of a sudden just started doing cartwheels for no reason and it didn't fit into that, it might not be very well integrated. But like instead, if maybe they had a circus theme or an act and they were doing cartwheels and some aerobatics, or well, maybe not aerobatics, but juggling or something like that, and it fit into your circus storyline, that would be integrated and make sense, right? But if all of a sudden, you're on a ship and somebody's just doing cartwheels, it might not make sense. So think about that as well and how everything can kind of fit together as you're going through and thinking about those scored elements as well. Regional tournaments. So the first thing that we have up in Minnesota, yours will be your affiliate tournament. So you'll just have the one. But for our Wisconsin teams and at the affiliate, a lot of this, other than the advancement, it may be a little bit different. Every team will compete against all other teams in their challenge and level and age group at the regional tournament. You might be in a room with elementary, middle, and high school teams. You might be in a room with multiple challenges. The same appraisers may look at everybody all day and score, but know at the end of the day, you're going to just be compared to other teams at your age level and in your challenge. Who advances to the next level depends on overall numbers, but at least the top two challenges per level will advance to the affiliate tournament. Michaela, do we know how many advance for Minnesota for globals?
Um, I believe that all Minnesota teams are eligible to attend global finals.
Okay. So more details to come on that, but just kind of think about that because I know Minnesota, you'll be at the at the affiliate tournament in Hudson, and then the next tournament that you will attend will be the global finals tournament. So on the regional tournament day, teams are going to be presenting twice. So you're going to get, which can be scheduled at any time during the day. So you're going to get a team challenge presentation time and an instant challenge presentation time. They could both be in the morning, they could both be in the afternoon. One can be in the morning, one can be in the afternoon. It really varies. Um, Try to give teams as much time as possible between the two. Um, but, depending on the schedule and depending on how many teams there are, we can't really predict that. When you do register for your tournament, if you do have a school related or a conflict where like you had something later in the day that one of your team members was participating in, or if they had something first thing in the morning, sometimes solo and ensembles or forensics or things like that can overlap. You can request a particular time, or and they will do everything that they can to accommodate that. Otherwise, as you're planning with your parents, you should plan to set the entire day aside for the tournaments. So we're back to in-person award ceremonies at the end of the competition. So you'll have your scheduled times, and then late afternoon, there'll be a time where we do awards. Rising stars will get their medals right after their team challenge, but everybody else will know how you scored and how you the rankings for second, third, and so on at those award ceremonies. If you can stay for the award ceremony, it's fun. Generally, there's music, slideshows often, just kind of exciting to cheer on other teams as well. So definitely encourage you to do that if you can, or have at least as many kids as you can do that. Our affiliate tournaments, so teams that do well enough at their regional tournaments are going to be, for Wisconsin, invited to participate at the affiliate tournament on Saturday, April 11th in Sun Prairie. Rising Stars don't go to the affiliate tournament, but all our competitive teams that are score well enough, so first and second for sure, and potentially additional teams, depending on numbers, or if there's a challenge that has a lot of teams, sometimes we do send some more on. They will be eligible to participate in that in Sun Prairie on April 11th. And then our teams that do well enough at the affiliate tournament will be invited to participate in global finals. So definitely plan ahead. Minnesota, the global finals days, if you think that's something that you want to participate in. Wisconsin teams definitely for sure put the April 11th. And if your team has competitive goals, definitely check out those May dates. It's going to be the week before Memorial Day. think the 21st through the 24th are the exact dates for globals this year. Um, I think it ends on the Sunday still again. So just keep that in mind so that you are not surprised about travel schedules or things like that, especially for that April tournament. That's the week after kind of the Easter and I think after most spring breaks. So we should hopefully be okay there. So that's kind of the tournaments. And now, once you get to the tournament, we're going to talk a little bit about who's who and what to expect. I realized I didn't really put question slides in, but I'm gonna take a drink and see if anybody has any questions. All right. So key roles, who's who. So we're going to talk about how your officials, or how your teams are going to interact with all of these officials. But as we go through this training, there'll be some key roles of people that we talk about. So we're going to talk about the challenge master and head appraiser. So every challenge site, every challenge at a tournament has somebody that we call a challenge master. They are the expert in your challenge at that tournament. They know the rules, they know the insides and outs. They're the people that help set up your site, train and recruit appraisers, and just make sure that everything is running smoothly all day long. Now, if you have multiple sites at your tournaments, so say there's a lot of teams and like a state tournament where there's multiple levels happening at the same time, you may also have somebody called a head appraiser. So this head appraiser is also an expert at the site, but they're responsible for the day-to-day on tournament day operation of that site, keeping things moving, answering questions, handing back scores, things like that. The challenge master and head appraiser could be the same person, or they could be different people. So if you meet somebody called the challenge master, know that they're the one that's in charge and can answer all your questions. If you meet somebody called a head appraiser, that person is also going to be your go-to person at that tournament day. And there are challenge masters at the regional level. So there are regional challenge masters. That's who's going to be at the regional tournament. And then we have affiliate challenge masters in Wisconsin who oversee all of the other challenge masters for their challenge within Wisconsin and Minnesota. And then we have international challenge masters who are responsible worldwide. But that's what that role is. And that just means expert in the challenge. Everybody at the tournament that's going to be putting down the scores are called the appraisers. So for a lot of other things, these might be what we call the judges. We like to call them appraisers because we focus and celebrate teams in the positive versus the judging. But that's who those people are. They're going to be watching your team presentations, they're going to be putting down scores, and they're going to be interacting with your team and asking questions on tournament day. We also have another appraiser that you're going to interact with called the prep appraiser. So this is the person that's going to meet you when you kind of check in at the challenge site. They're going to review all your paperwork. They're going to look at your safety guidelines, make sure that everybody has shoes on, you're not doing anything dangerous, and just kind of walk through everything and greet you and just kind of be that welcoming committee for you. They can answer any questions that you might have. They're going to also take a look at all of your data forms that you've submitted, things like that. So that prep appraiser doesn't score, but they're really an important part of our appraisal team. You're also going to interact with somebody called the timekeeper announcer. So this person, once you get from the prep area and move into the presentation site, into kind of what we call the launch area, they're going to come and say hi, introduce yourself, show you where if the outlets are, if you need to plug something in, kind of explain the site flow. They're going to introduce you and your teams. So that's a really important key role there. Keep the audience engaged, make sure everybody's cheering for everybody, keep the appraisers on time and the site flowing. So a really important part of the time. They're also the person that's going to tell your team that their time is ready to begin. And if the timer goes off and they've used their 8 minutes or their 5-minute performance time, that person is going to call time and then the team will be asked to take a bow and stop their presentation. So just some key names. I know we like to make up titles in DI, so if you're new, you're not always familiar with who these people are. But I think, that way as we go through the rest of these slides about the tournament, we'll be talking about how your team is going to interact with each of these people. So key activities. We're going to kind of walk through these activities that happen during the tournament day and what happens and what your team should be prepared for. So we're going to start with pre-prep. That's going to be your tournament data forms that you submit a week before your tournament. And so we'll talk through that process. Then we're going to talk about the prep area. We're going to talk about the appraisers reading paperwork and what might happen there, and any questions that the appraisers might have, how the presentation site works, some sample Q&A questions. So after the presentation, the appraisers are going to ask your team some questions. So what you as a team manager can do to help your team prepare for that. Then we're going to talk about putting down scores, how you can pick up your raw scores and understand how your team solved the challenge. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what happens in instant challenge as well. So every team in Wisconsin and Minnesota is going to be asked to submit their paperwork as part of a pre-prep process. There's full details in the tournament guide, and there's outlines in the rules of the road as well for how you do this. But you as a team manager will log into the resource area and have an opportunity to upload documents and fill out all of the forms that you need to submit everything. And we'll talk about what goes into all of those as well. We ask that you do that the Friday before your tournament, because then what's going to happen is that our challenge masters are going to go in and review all those forms. That's a good thing for you, because if there's something missing, or if the appraisers are reading something and they feel like something you've selected to be scored doesn't meet the challenge requirements or isn't eligible for score, they're going to tell you via kind of the messaging portal in the pre-prep process, that they need some more information, or you need to take a look at something, because then you and your team can go back and make changes if you need to before tournament day so that you're not in a scramble. So if the appraisers have a question for you, you're going to get an email at the email on file with Destination Imagination about that message. And so definitely once you've got that submitted, so between the prep submission deadline and the prep review deadline, you can expect some sort of a communication of looks good, or hey, can you take a look at that? Or we had a question about this, and back and forth. And you'll be able to message back as well as part of that process. So plan accordingly. Now we know, and I was on teams like to change things up until the last minute sometime. That's okay. So if you submit your paperwork and something happens where you need to make a change, just shoot a message into that portal, and we can unlock you and you can resubmit that. We're going to review this again on tournament day. And what you have on tournament day was what we'll consider the final version. But if you can have this early feedback, it just makes everything a lot easier. So that, you're not scrambling and filling out an expense report that you forgot to do in the 20 minutes before your team is performing. So just keep that in mind. And you can do that as a team manager, but your kids should certainly be part of the process of knowing what goes into those tournament data forms. So virtual pre-prep. So as part of that pre-prep deadline, you're going to need to submit a few things. So your tournament data forms, which are going to tell the appraisers what your team wants scored. So what you're scoring for each element, what your team choice elements are, that the appraisers will read that, and that's what they're going to use to know how to score your team. So really important. Your expense report for all teams but improv are all team challenges. So that's going to be, right, that is still true, Michaela. There's not an improv.
Ooh, let me double
Let
check.
me double check. I have this, but they have to have a box of stuff, so I'm questioning that. Michaela's gonna just keep me honest there. Sometimes improv has to do one. And then also as part of this, a team challenge prep checklist. So that's going to include safety information, just a kind of a checklist to make sure that you've got everything for your team challenge elements, the Declaration of Independence, and just kind of an overall making sure you're all ready and set. You're also going to go through an instant challenge prep checklist, and we'll talk about each of these forms here in a minute. So tournament data forms. So the team should be part of this. Absolutely, you as a team manager should help facilitate this and actually submit them, but they really should be team driven. As an appraiser, I have absolutely asked teams questions about this, and they have not known what's on them and what they're being scored. And that is not what we want to do at all. We have a question.
It's
Or was
just
that was
saying,
just you?
yes, improv needs an expense report this year.
Okay, I will update these slides then. So just kidding, improv, you need to do one too. That's why I was second guessing. I'm like, wait, they have a box of materials. Um, so this is really your team's opportunity to explain to the appraisers what's being scored. So in the pre-prep, the focus is going to be on, because we obviously can't see your stuff, we don't see your team, so we can't 100% review all of this. We're going to make sure that you listed something for every element, right? I always say some points are better than no points, and our goal as appraisers is try to get teams as many points as possible. And so if you accidentally didn't list something, we're going to ask like, "Hey, are you sure you don't have anything that you could score? Like what could you do?" And try to get you some points there. We're also going to make sure that something isn't being scored twice. So, for example, like a team choice element can be a part of something that's already being scored, but it can't be the exact scored element that's being scored. So, just making sure that we understand what the differences are around what's being scored. So, if you have very similar elements, please try to be descriptive about how they're unique from each other, because you can have a team choice element that is a part of a larger scored item that's maybe just a different part that isn't being scored as part of the central challenge. But if that's not clear, the appraisers might come back and say, hey, can you explain how these two items are different? And that way the appraisers will be able to be really clear on what they're scoring. We're also going to make sure that for central challenge elements that only one thing is listed as being scored. So if you have to pick a character or a prop or one thing, that has to be one thing. You have to choose. It can't be all of your characters or all of your things. Now, a team choice element, if you had costumes, you could list multiple costumes and we could score everything for a team choice element. But if the central challenge is a singular costume, then you have to pick just one. So we're going to make sure that that is listed as just one item there. Again, the prep area appraiser on tournament day is going to look at this again, and the appraisers are going to look at the skin. So even if there's not questions on the tournament data form by the challenge master during the pre-prep process, we could have additional follow-up questions on tournament day, but we are going to try to catch as much as we can ahead of time because it just makes everybody's life easier, that you guys have some time to adjust this. So this is kind of an example of what you're going to be asked to fill in. So you'll type in a brief description of what is happening, and then that brief description is going to be available in a mobile client, on their phones or an iPad or whatever the appraisers are scoring on, to be able to read that and see what it is that they're scoring. Um, you'll see boxes here. Sometimes there's tables. So you'll be able to go through and type all of this in and make sure that everything is filled out. Some tips for TDFs. I've read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these, maybe even thousands at this point. Be very specific. We want you to add enough so that appraisers know exactly what they're scoring, but also keep it brief. Appraisers have a very tight schedule on tournament day, And they're going to be trying to quickly read these after they've put down scores for their last team and before your team performs and keep us on a 20-minute schedule. Like each team has a 20-minute block generally. So just don't write a book. I say this as a team member who is very verbose. um, I wrote way too much. And as an appraiser that's had to read a lot of these, if there's too much, it's often hard to know what you're scoring, and you spend too much time just trying to decipher what it is. So be specific, but keep it brief. Also, make sure you're spell checking, and that it's just keeps it clean and nice. Let the team drive this. We can absolutely tell when it's adult words versus kid descriptions. Again, the kids should know what their elements are and what they're being scored on. And, some points are better than no points. Don't leave anything blank. You can always find something to be scored. Expense report. So this is going to be the total value, including improv, of all materials your team will use in your presentation, not necessarily what your team spent to create the solution. We love that our DI teams are resourceful. We use, they find things, teams' parents donate things. They're often very creative. But the idea of the expense report is if another team was going to duplicate your solution, could they do it for the budget provided? And so we're really looking for something that's reasonable here. Your team budget's going to be in the copy of the challenge, so on that front page. Every challenge is slightly different. Obviously, improv is going to be lower than like a technical solution just because we recognize that some of the things that like, excuse me, a technical team might need to use in their solution might cost a little bit more. But definitely take a look at what that dollar amount is. It's not the same for every challenge. And another thing that's really key is that our expense report is only the supplies, equipment, and props, scenery, and costumes that are part of your team's presentation that you actually bring to the presentation site. So you don't have to include any equipment or tools used to create your solution. You don't have to use portions or materials that were left over or not used. If you tried something and it didn't work and you scrapped it and you did something else, we don't care. We just care about what is there on tournament day. So a really good check is to have your team do a dress rehearsal and have everything with them, prep go through, have everything in the launch area, have them perform, and then leave everything up. And then take your expense report and go through it and make sure that absolutely everything that you had on that tournament day is included in your expense report and you didn't figure out anything out. So the full details are in the rules of the road. There's a lot of details about all of these things. You are going to have an opportunity to attach receipts. If you bought something brand new, absolutely, attach that receipt. We'd love to see it. It's appreciated, but absolutely not required. You're not going to get dinged if you don't attach something. The only time that it absolutely is essential is if your team is using a one-day rental. So if your team decided that, they were using an air compressor, for example, and they wanted to have a one-day rental on it, your team has to either submit a quote or a receipt from a rental company as proof of the stated one-day only price. Now, you don't have to have actually rented it. It could be something that you had, a dad had, a parent had, you had, but it has to be somewhere official from a rental company. Again, could another team rent that for a day? Is it something that is readily available for rental? And if you do that, it has to be a receipt in those expense report files. Also, another thing that teams often don't do is if the rules of the road lists a lot of things that are exempt, like musical instruments, certain electronics, things like that. They have a $0 or exempt, but they should still be on the expense report as something that your team used. You're just going to put $0 in there for what the cost is because it's an exempt item. So make sure you're listing those things. And then another thing is only true trash supplies are listed as trash. So cardboard, newspaper, pop tabs, things like that that are true trash can get lumped and should be listed out in that. If it was something that another team would have to buy, or even if you got it for free, if it wasn't readily available for free, it should still have some sort of a value associated with that. So common things that we see, not everything included, right? Now, this is where we look at your expense report ahead of time to make sure that you've got things on. Like usually when I'm reviewing expense reports as part of team of the pre-prep process is I'll read your scored elements and how you described what kind of materials were being used, and then I'll go and look and see if those kinds of things are on the expense report. We're also looking that the prices are reasonable. We're not going to get out and like price every item of what it should be, but we are going to make sure that your prices are reasonable. So if one person put $3 for something and another team put $2, there's not that level of scrutiny on the variability. We understand some variability might happen, but we're looking for things like, everybody knows the price of lumber, that you didn't go out and buy 10 boards and that you priced them for $5, right? It's reasonably priced items. Um, Another common thing is listing the full value for an entire item. So if you had to buy a roll of tape and you only used a quarter of it, you would only put the 25% cost of that item on there. You don't have to use the whole price of that item, just the percent that you used. Listing items used in practice and testing, not in the final presentation. Definitely don't need to do that. Sometimes, a lot of times, people like to call things trash or used or devalued, especially around the wood and the building materials. And then also, sometimes teams try to price everything as new, even if it was used. It is totally acceptable to put garage sale prices down for things. And what is reasonable that you might find at that point. Now, this is supposed to be a learning opportunity for the teams, right? And we recognize, particularly elementary teams, they might not know what things cost, right? So, as a team manager, that is kind of a learning skill exercise that you would go through to help get them some prices. Maybe you do a trip to Goodwill or you go to a garage sale and just kind of see how people price things. And that might help you look at it. If you've got new things, online, go on Amazon, go on other places, find and show them what things cost. So definitely they should be part of this. I have 100% had teams when they've had an expense report with missing things on it and we look at it, they give me deer in the headlights and they've never seen it before in their life. You don't want to be that team manager. Obviously, we'll work through it with the team at that point and have them fill it out and we'll roll up our sleeves and do it together and get it done. But definitely they should be familiar, or at least somebody on your team should be familiar with how you're filling this out. And you shouldn't just, as a team manager, do this in a vacuum yourself the night before the pre-prep deadline because you forgot to do it. So take some time in the coming weeks to talk through this and make sure that everybody is comfortable with this. Most of the time, there's not issues with expense reports. We're really looking for things that are not a level playing field. So really egregious technical solutions or a lot of boards and wood and over the top things that just realistically aren't in the spirit of could you do this for $200 or $150, right? So again, appraisers are looking for things that are reasonable and common sense when it comes for prices on these things. And make sure you look at those rules of the road. It lists out a lot of details about how you can value these items. All right, tournament prep checklist. So the safety section is something on here that you should definitely take a look at. So one of the things that is really important is we're going to make sure all team members have shoes with soles on them and that they leave them on. That is really safety. So make sure that as part of their costumes, they have a shoe on. If your team is using any chemicals for anything or chemical reactions, please provide a copy of the SDS sheet as part of that. That is required. A few notes, dry ice and helium will not be allowed, I think, at any of our tournaments in Wisconsin. I think that's still a correct statement, right, Michaela?
Yep, that's correct.
So no dry ice and no helium for the regionals or the affiliate tournament. This is also going to include a challenge requirements checklist. So just another thing that says, yep, we did this and we have all of these things and we're ready to come to tournament with all of those things. And then it's also going to include a declaration of independence. So all team members, including any who can't make the tournament or people that quit, should be listed on the Declaration of Independence. So your team is up to 7 team members, whether they are there on tournament day or not, right? So anybody that contributed to the idea generation or building of your solution should be listed on the Declaration of Independence. Um, and then we're going to be looking at this, and you should have your team understand what it is that they're signing. Basically, they're saying, hey, we promise that everything that we did in our team solution was our ideas, our building, our stuff. We did it all. We are declaring our independence from the adults. Look at what we did. And so the kids are going to certify that, and you as a team manager are going to say, to the best of my knowledge, yep, everybody did this. We are declaring our independence. No interference here. There will be an opportunity if there was interference. We would ask that you declare that. Now, if you do declare interference, we'll talk about deductions, but it's not fair to other teams if there was interference. So a deduction would likely be assessed in that case. But certainly if there was some outside help on anything, there is a place for you to declare that. So we're going to look at this and make sure that your team members are listed and that things are filled out there and that the no isn't circled interference. And if there is, that's a conversation that the challenge masters will want to have with you and your team to make sure they understand that. All right, so that's a week before. You're going to fill out all your tournament data forms and hit submit. The challenge masters are going to take a look at that. We ask our challenge masters to try to turn this around as quickly as possible, but for sure by the Wednesday, you'll have feedback on the yep, looks good, or hey, can you take a look at that? If need be, a couple iterations of that can happen to make sure that everything is set to go. So you're going to do that, and then we're going to fast forward to the next section. I'm going to take a pause here and see if there's any questions. We're going to jump into tournament day itself. All right. So tournament day. So this is kind of a rough timeline for your central challenge at your tournament. You could have an 8 a.m. performance time, 9 a.m. performance time. You could have a 3 p.m. performance time. It's really going to vary from tournament to tournament. But a few weeks before your tournament, generally, those schedules are released. So you'll be able to see what your team challenge presentation time is. So in this example, you would have a 9 a.m. performance time. So I'm going to talk about this as if you're an engineering team, and then I'm going to talk about this timeline as if you are any other team outside of Rising Stars, but roughly Rising Stars could probably follow the same timeline as well. But this is really meant to be competitive teams. So if you are an engineering team, if we tell you that your team challenge performance time is 9 a.m., you are actually going to need to check in your structure and your weights 1 hour prior to that scheduled time. So you would need to be at the tournament site ready with your structure and your weights at 8 a.m. That's going to take roughly 10 minutes. But the reason we do that an hour ahead of time is because if there's any problems where your structure or your weights aren't meeting challenge requirements, we want to give your team to make modifications, right? And so that is going to be 1 hour prior to it. And we'll talk a little bit more about check-in a few slides. Everybody else, 20 minutes prior to your team challenge performance time, you should be arriving with all of your props and scenery and sets and everything at the designated prep area. So 8:40, everybody should be in costume. Everybody should be on site. So we say this because obviously you're going to need to plan accordingly for when you arrive at the school and have time to unload your props. If you need to do any assembly, if people have to get in costume, people have to put makeup on, that you're planning ahead of time because it's 20 minutes before we need you to kind of go through some stuff, or an hour before if you're engineering. So that 8:40, about 15 minutes or so, you'll be in the prep area. And then 5 minutes before the presentation, once the team before you has finished their performance, you'll start moving into the launch area. And we'll talk about what happens there. Then an 8-minute performance time. We try really hard to be on time. Sometimes we can run a little bit behind, but we will never start early because we want to make sure that parents and everybody can be there for that presentation time. But we often do start right on the dot. So make sure that your parents and everybody knows when that time is. We encourage you to have people come and watch your team's central challenge presentation. It's going to be open, so you can watch other teams as well, not just your own. So definitely encourage you, if you're not doing your instant challenge or prepping for your own presentation, that you watch some other teams in your challenge or other challenges. It's always more fun, right, when you've got a big audience for your teams and people cheering them on. So definitely encourage teams to do that. So they'll be performing for about 8 minutes. The timekeeper announcer will announce them. And then after that presentation for roughly 5 minutes, the appraisers are going to do some Q&A with the team. So when they call time and they do a bow, you shouldn't grab their stuff right away. Like, leave everything up because the appraisers want to come and look at it and ask questions and everything. So once they're done, the timekeeper announcer will tell everybody that they're finished. And then you or parents or anybody can come and help pick stuff up and get all of your props and everything off the presentation area and exit out before the next team goes on. And then we do all of our scoring via mobile scoring these days, which means that within 30 minutes or less, generally, you're going to have scores ready for pickup. So typically we tell people, go exit, put your props away, and then come back with a team member, and we'll talk about that process here as we go to pick up your scores. But this isn't like the old days, if anybody has done this before, where we needed to send things to a central score room and it was a big delay. We're very speedy. Once all those scores are in and the challenge master gets a chance to look at that, they're ready to give you those raw scores back. So that is going to be your team challenge performance time and kind of the schedule that you should expect. Now, you're also going to be scheduled for an instant challenge time. This is going to be in a separate area at the school than your team challenge presentation time. And while parents and other people can watch the team challenge, instant challenge is only for teams and one team manager. So again, you should be planning not to just show up immediately at your scheduled instant challenge time, but about 20 to 30 minutes ahead of time for your instant challenge. So for a 9 a.m. central or instant challenge, your team should be heading to and arriving at the instant challenge area around 8:30 or so. There's going to be a check-in table when you get to instant challenge because we don't just let people wander around the instant challenge area, right? Where you're going to check in at a table. And then once you've done that, your team and a team manager are going to be brought into a holding room where you're going to wait and be prepared until you're ready for your instant challenge. At that point, an appraiser is going to come and get you from that holding room and walk you into the actual challenge room. Those rooms are, it's down silent, quiet hallways. The windows are taped because we really want it to be secret, right? And so that teams don't get to see what's happening in that instant challenge room until your team competes. So, somebody will come and get you, bring you to that instant challenge area. Roughly 10 minutes, you'll be in that instant challenge room. You'll complete your instant challenge. And then afterwards, you're going to be sent to what we call a chill out space. So, as part of this process, you promise that you're not going to talk about the instant challenge that you just completed with anybody other than your team until after global finals. But we give you a safe space right afterwards so that you can process and debrief and in a safe space talk about what just happened in your instant challenge. We ask that you do that in that chill out room. And then once you leave that chill out room, that you're not chatting about that IC during tournament day out in the open because we don't want another team learning about what your instant challenge is, right? Because that would provide an unfair advantage. And actually, we would disqualify a team if we heard that they were sharing information about instant challenge. So definitely plan to use that chill out space to kind of debrief after instant challenge. All right, any questions on that timeline? Otherwise, I'm going to get a little bit specific around some engineering and improv things that are a little different. All right. So for engineering, your structure and weight check-in. So this is going to be in a designated area separate from the prep area, but generally close to your prep and your presentation site. So 1 hour prior to the presentation time, your whole team doesn't have to come with to check in. Generally 1 to 2 team members and a team manager. If you've got a high school team and team manager doesn't come, just kids come totally fine. But typically if you've got elementary teams, a team manager likes to attend as well. You're going to bring all of your structure parts and weights along with a team provided container to store your unassembled structure parts and weights in. There's been a lot of questions that we've been getting around the containers. So in the challenge for engineering, and this is only going to make sense if you're engineering, there's reference to an 18-inch by 18-inch by 18-inch box that we're going to use to validate your structure parts and weights. You don't need to provide that. That is going to be provided by the tournament. The container we're talking about here can be made out of anything and can be any size. And that is going to be used after we check all of your structure parts in. You're going to put all of your weights and your structure parts separately into that box or container or whatever it is. And we're going to seal that until you're ready for the presentation. And that just shows that, yep, we weighed this, nobody's tampered with anything. This is what's ready to go. So what the team provided container is not that 18 by 18 box. So just know that. During this process, the appraisers are going to verify that all of the structure and weights meet the challenge requirements. So they're going to weigh it. They're going to validate the size. They're going to look at the materials. And if there are any issues and something doesn't meet the requirements, your team will, there's generally a fix-it area or a table or a place where they can bring some fix-it kits or supplies to make modifications. And then they'll bring that back in and for recheck-in during that time. We really want every team to be able to bring things into compliance if they're able to. So you'll have that whole hour up until the presentation time to be able to get that check-in process going. We will not allow you to check in earlier because we do want to give every team the same advantage of that 1 hour time. So don't come early, but do come on that 1 hour mark as part of that check-in process. And if your team is doing modifications and rebuilding, Do keep in mind that you still are going to be expected to be in the prep area 20 minutes before your presentation time. So that might be a divide and conquer kind of a situation where a few team members work on the structure and everybody else is working on getting everything ready to bring to the prep area. We hope that doesn't happen, but if it does, just kind of be prepared for that and talk about that with your teams and have a plan for what might happen if something doesn't meet the requirements. So prep area. So all teams are going to arrive in the prep area 20 minutes before. This is going to be in a hallway generally or on the side of the gym, somewhere close to the presentation area, but generally not in the presentation area. The exception would be if it's a gym, it's a large space, so there's enough, you know, spread out enough so that you can talk because the prep area is going to have a conversation with your team right ahead of time. Oftentimes, uh, this is through a doorway to your presentation site. So a reminder that all of your props should fit through a standard size doorway to get from the prep to the launch area. You're not going to have time really to assemble anything once you move from prep to launch because that's literally less than 5 minutes usually until you're ready to begin. So just keep that in mind as you are making plans that you try the doorway test. I definitely remember my 6th grade year, our stuff didn't fit through a doorway and we had to do some cutting and everything fell apart and it was a really stressful situation. So definitely consider that as you're planning that things do have to go through a doorway. Your presentation site could be in like a gym, but the doors to the gym might not be double doors, they might be single doors. So you're going to bring everything that you need to that prep area. Parents, team managers, everybody can be muscle and carry things to the prep area and up to the launch area. But then the teams are going to have to actually get their stuff from launch to the presentation site. But it is totally okay for you to have parents and you as a team manager to help haul and bring things to prep and then from prep into the presentation site. Engineering teams at this time, you're going to leave your structure and containers at weights at check-in. So you're going to go get those, but don't break the seal. The prep appraiser will have you do that once it's there. If you break the seal, you have to go through prematurely, you have to go through the check-in process again. So we don't want to do that. So we've already pre-prepped all your tournament data forms, so this process is generally pretty quick, but we do still go through anything. If your team has made modifications after things have been submitted, or the forms are not the most recent and you need to resubmit, make sure that you go through that process again and get them resubmitted. If you think you might need to make edits, it's nice for you as a team manager to have an iPad or a computer. Any small edits, the prep appraiser can do on your behalf. So we can go into edit mode and add something to an expense report or put a comment in or things like that. But if you think it's going to be anything extensive that you might have to make edits yourself, which should be limited, right? Because of the pre-prep process, you might want a computer with that. You don't really need to print lots of copies of things. We as appraisers use honestly, most people are on their mobile phones or on an iPad. So you'll be able to walk through that process. We'll walk through all of the electronic forms, and the prep appraiser will walk through that with you. We're also going to highlight any team clarifications. So it's still within the deadline. If you have any questions about your challenge, if you're confused about a requirement or something that you can do or can't do, you can still submit a question to the International Challenge Masters for a team clarification. So if you did that, at prep, you might want to highlight that you did have team clarifications, and the appraisers do have a tab in the mobile scoring client to read those clarifications. But if you did do that, you'll want to highlight that you had clarifications at this time when you're in the prep area. the prep area, right? All team members are present, that there's only 7 and no more. I did have a team tournament one time where we had 8 people, which was definitely a surprise. And we had to have a conversation about that. And actually, the team was disqualified because that's not allowed. So make sure we only have 7, up to 7 team members, and that everybody's there. Make sure you've got everything submitted. They're going to look at your expense report here a little bit more detailed, right? Because we checked it, but we're going to look at all of your props and all of your stuff and just do another check when you get to the prep area now that we can see your stuff and make sure. They're also going to ask you about flash photography and video. So just if that's allowed, do you want people to take pictures? Is flash okay? Is video okay? They're going to ask that question for you in the prep area, or the TKA might ask that question. Sometimes kids get thrown by that because they weren't expecting it, but know that we do ask that. Photo releases, I think, have been signed, so there may be people from the Wisconsin affiliate taking photos and things. But in general, we do ask that people respect it if the team doesn't ask, it does not consent to photography or videos. We're also going to check, safety guidelines as outlined in the rules of the road. This is particularly if there's chemicals, if you've got batteries, if you've done wiring, things like that. We're going to just double check to make sure that everything is safe and everything is there. Keep in mind that the prep appraiser may be the only person at the tournament day to look at your expense report. If there are problems with anything, the prep appraiser may come and grab the challenge master and help walk you through things as well. But if we've got experienced prep appraisers, a lot of times they can just walk through that process with you themselves and make sure that everything is clear and that you've got everything ready to go. If you are an improv team, your prep will look a little different and have some extra steps. So you'll have a box of materials. So improv does have some stuff this year. So you'll bring that box of materials, and the prep appraiser is going to inspect everything at this point to ensure that all of the items meet the specifications outlined in the challenge. So be prepared for that. Your team is also going to select your improv elements. So there'll be some sort of a bag or a box or something where they can pull improv items out. They won't look at them and hand them to the prep appraiser. So that'll happen for your exciting incident. You'll select a number that corresponds to one of your opposing themes. You'll select a paper that lists a setting, and then select a numbered paper that is one of the team's resolution tropes. So that'll all happen in the presentation area. And then when we get to the presentation site, they'll know what those are at that time. So you'll select them, but they're not going to tell you what they are in the prep area. So we'll be in prep for roughly 15 minutes or so, walk through everything. Once the team ahead of you is done and cleared out, you will head into the launch area. So there will be some sort of a line taped or indicated in the presentation area that is the launch line. So teams and team managers and parents, whoever can help, move props to the launch line, and you're going to set everything behind that. But then from there, it's up to the teams to move everything out to the presentation area. At this point, team managers, you're going to have designated chairs or a spot on the bleachers or somewhere where you can sit. And once your team is at the launch area, you really can sit back and go sit down and just kind of wait. No need for you to linger. And let the appraisers kind of ask the kids questions. The timekeeper and announcer will come and introduce themselves, kind of walk them through the orientation to the presentation site. The teams should always perform to wherever the audience is. Sometimes the appraiser tables are off to the side or in weird spots. The appraisers, and if that's the case, are going to get up and move. And so in general, as you're practicing, teams should present to the audience. As part of that, generally, unless there's something very specific, in the challenge around measurements of things that they have to stay within and measured zones on the floor. They can use however much space that they're given. Um, they're gonna, if there is electricity allowed, there will be an outlet of some kind or an extension cord of some kind to the edge of the site. So if the teams need that, the timekeeper announcer will point out where that is, and just kind of orient them. A note about that. Practice launching from lots of different areas. From the back, from the side, your extension cord on the right, your extension cord on the left. I have seen teams melt down because they always put their prop here on the front left and they didn't bring an extension cord and the power cord is on the right and they don't know what to do. So you as team manager is going to practice that. If you have to plug something in, you're going to bring a cord yourself so that that can be oriented anywhere. You're going to get them to practice launching from the back and moving forward, launching from the side and moving in, and just getting them really used to lots of different configurations for that presentation site. You will oftentimes know what your sites are and where your sites are ahead of time. Some of our tournaments I know do some walkthroughs and things like that. But until tournament day, everything is likely not going to be set up. So definitely encourage you when you get there in the morning to come take a peek at what your tournament site looks like and just kind of look at it and see, and then you can kind of practice and talk through that and what that looks like and where the launch area is and where prep is and all of that. If you are improv at this point in the launch area, your timekeeper announcer is going to introduce the team to the audience, but there's going to be a preparation time ahead of time, so you're going to have an extra step before your performance begins. So the TKA is going to read your selected inciting incident, your setting, and your opposing themes to the team and the audience. And then the timekeeper announcer is going to hand the written version of those to the team so they have them. And then they're going to start a 2-minute prep time. So the TKA will announce begin, and then the team will have 2 minutes to kind of prepare and prep. And once that 2 minutes is done, they'll stop. And then once the team has returned to kind of the launch area to get ready, the timekeeper announcer at that point is going to read the selected resolution trope to the team and audience. And then the team will get that written. And then they'll continue with their introductions and tell the team to begin their 5-minute presentation time. For everybody else, that prep part doesn't happen. So the TKA will just announce the team and then tell the team that they can begin. And then they'll have their 8 minutes to perform. So just like to kind of talk about those distinctions between improv and the other challenges. So while your team is in the launch area and the TKA is talking to you, this is the point that the appraisers are going to be reading your paperwork. So all of those tournament data forms and everything, they're going to read everything to make sure that they understand what they're looking for when it comes to scored elements. They're going to double check that anything that isn't being double scored that wasn't caught in prep. Sometimes the appraisers are a little bit more experts on the challenge than prep is. And so, they might catch something or have some additional questions there. They're going to be focusing specifically at this point on anything that is performance related or has to take place during the presentation, aka they can't look at it afterwards. And because they want to make sure they don't miss it, right? And so they're going to focus on that. If it's something like a costume or a set or something like that, yes, they're going to read about it, but they know afterwards they can go look at it and see it, and that won't have changed, right? But if it's a song or a dance or something live that happens, they want to know what that is and they want to know when it's going to happen to make sure that they are ready for it. If the appraisers have questions, they might go and ask the team for clarification in the launch area. If this happens, do not be alarmed, team manager. We are doing that because we want to give the team as many points as possible, and the appraisers just want to make sure that they're knowing, right? So if it's Johnny's song and dance on a team where there's all guys where dance is incorporated throughout, They might say, "Hey, who's Johnny and when will I know when this song and dance that's going to be scored is?" And then, they might ask, and then Johnny's going to raise a hand. The appraiser's going to say, "Hey, this is Johnny." And all the appraisers are going to look at that and then a thumbs up, and everybody's going to know that when this guy dances, that's what they're going to score. If they feel something's being scored twice and they need the team to clarify or pick something else to be scored, that can happen there. With the pre-prep process, most of that is caught way ahead of time and doesn't happen as much as it used to. But they just do that, or if they're just generally confused about what they're looking at, they might just ask some question. Doesn't always happen. Sometimes it does happen. It's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just giving the appraisers what they need to give your team as many points as possible. We would much rather ask ahead of time and address it ahead of time because once the presentation has happened and they've missed something or something wasn't right, it's too late to fix it. So we do this ahead of time. Pain points for appraisers. It's really not enough description or too much information or not relevant information are the worst pain points, right? They need to have enough to know what to score, but they don't have time to read a book. So just keep that in mind. And also keep in mind that a lot of them are reading it on their phones. So, they don't want to be scrolling forever as they get the information. Appraising the presentation, a few things to keep in mind. Each appraiser is only scoring certain things, and so they're going to watch the whole presentation, but they're going to be focused on the specific things that they're scoring during their presentation. So we often talk about heads down and heads up appraisers. So for engineering and technical, for instance, in particular, right? If they need to be watching the testing of a structure, appraisers are going to look at that and not score anything else. Or if they're technical, there's going to be people looking at task completion and things like that. Then there's going to be other appraisers that are going to be focused more on the overall story and the live presentation, the integration scores, things like that. So just keep in mind that if it looks like some people are focused on very specific things and not watching everything, that's by design, right? Um, Appraisers are encouraged to move around so that they can see and hear during the presentation, especially those that are doing anything with tasks or testing of certain things. Those appraisers are going to be up and down and on the floor and looking at things and marking things down as clipboards and really in the middle of everything. Just because they have to see what they need to see to make sure things are being scored appropriately. Also, like if it's an elementary team, I know none of you, all of you would have heard kids in the gym or at a playground, right? And it's hard to believe. But for whatever reason, when it comes time for DI presentation time, kids can often be very quiet and hard to hear. So if a team is really struggling, sometimes appraisers will get really close so that they can hear what's going on, because if they can't hear it, they can't score it. Also keep in mind that appraisers are going to use mobile scoring. So if they have their phones in their hand during the presentation, they're scoring and reading things on their phones. Rest assured, they're not like reading a text from somebody else and not paying attention. So just let your teams know that they will have phones and iPads and things like that out, and that's what they're going to be scoring on. Pain points for appraisers. Unable to hear the kids is really by far the biggest challenge, right? Because if we can't hear the story and we can't hear what's going on, it's really hard to score that. So definitely if your kids, tell your kids in practice, like pretend that grandma's in the back row and she left your hearing aid at home. Have them be incredibly loud, and encourage them to speak up so that the appraisers can hear them. It's also really hard as an appraiser if they're completely confused as to what's going on and there's, no clear storyline. I also as a team member did not always follow this, but like sometimes really complex storylines are hard to follow. Remember that the appraisers are only seeing it once and they have to follow it and they have to understand what's happening. They don't get to watch it 10 times over and over again and know and kind of put things together. Um, Other pain points, multiple elements happening at once that need to be scored. It is absolutely allowed for multiple scored elements to happen simultaneously, but just know that sometimes it's hard and we want to make it really clear what those elements are and when they're happening so that they can focus and give it the true attention that it needs to be. So if you have to have a certain activity or something that is happening during your presentation at a certain time, helping the team make sure that they're emphasizing when that happens and something isn't so brief that it's easy to blink and miss it, right? They're going to read the tournament data forms and they're going to ask questions after the fact. But if they don't understand what's going on and only get it once the team explains it afterwards, your scores are going to be impacted. Integration scores are also something that can be a pain point for appraisers. When we look at integration, we want everything to feel cohesive and that it makes sense that everything that they're doing all at once is happening together. So, we integration will talk about the rubrics and that'll make more sense when we get there. But hard to score, hard to do as a team member. So don't snooze and just ignore the integration. It's really important and there's a lot of points on it. So the appraisers are going to watch your team is going to perform. The team is, one thing that I do want to bring up back here in the launch area. So the team is going to announce, or the timekeeper announcer is going to announce the team. As part of this, they're going to ask the audience if they're ready, they're going to ask the appraisers if they're ready, and they're going to ask the team if they're ready. Now, it's not required, but oftentimes teams come up with some sort of a clever response to teams, are you ready? And that is absolutely encouraged. Again, not required, not scored, but it is a thing that some teams do that is cute. Could be a phrase, could be a little song or dance. It should be real brief, but definitely talk through with the team how that's going to happen and have them be prepared for that, because sometimes we get teams that are deer in headlights when they say, team, are you ready? And they don't know what to do or what to say. But we're looking for a verbal yes. And then after that happens, the timekeeper announcer will say, team, you may begin, and the time will start. So after the presentation is done, everybody is going to applaud. The team does not have to use the full 8 minutes or the full 5 minutes. That's totally fine. But they are given that whole time for their presentation. And that includes, like, for the engineering challenge, for instance, the testing of the structure can take the whole 8 minutes, and the story, sometimes they happen simultaneously. Sometimes teams may choose to do one and then the other. Even if the story and their skit is done, the team still has that full time to complete their scored elements. We're not going to stop them early. There is no penalty for finishing early. However, if time is called and you're out of time, we will stop you. Anything after that time is called cannot be scored, and so the appraisers aren't going to let your team finish if they're over time. So they're going to call time. Everybody's going to stop. The timekeeper announcer is going to have the team come up and take a bow. Everybody's going to cheer. And then the appraisers are going to come up and ask the team questions about their solution. Again, this is really important because this is an opportunity for the teams to get as many points as possible. So definitely talk about that this is going to happen with your team so they're not surprised and they're prepared to be excited and talk about what they did to a bunch of stranger adults, right? Who are, I promise you, very friendly, wonderful humans that are very excited to be there. So we train our appraisal teams on all of these things, but it's always good for your teams to be advocates for themselves as well. So we as appraisal teams really have this time is limited. So we want to focus on the scored elements. So if a team member, like let the appraisers lead and ask the questions, but if the team wasn't asked about a scored element, they should be nice about it, but say, hey, can I tell you about my XYZ? And, have somebody bring it up if they're not asked about something that's scored. Now, keep in mind, not every appraiser is scoring everything. And so make sure that the appraiser that you're telling something to is the person that's scoring it. So that's why it's often good to let the appraisers lead that effort so that the right people are focused in getting the information that they need about the right elements. Now, also, it is best to have the person that actually built the thing or did the thing or made the thing talk about how they built it, right? And so if an appraiser asks the team member, "Hey, can you tell me about this?" and the team member didn't do it, somebody else on their team made that costume, absolutely it's okay for that team member to say, "Hey, Becky can tell you about that item," and pull Becky over and let Becky give that description, right? Again, the team is going to get more points if Becky is able to describe in detail how she came up with the idea and did it than Jane, who is going to be deer in the headlights and be like, "I don't know, we made a costume, it was sewn." Like, but can't really tell you anything about it, right? So definitely consider that as well, that people it's okay for one person to have worked on something and everything doesn't have to be every person on the team did that. This is about 5 minutes. So while we'd like to know everything, we do keep it to the scored elements. And so if it isn't something that's scored in general, the team shouldn't bring that up and just start talking about it. We would love to talk all day about kids and their excitement and what they did. We just have a tight schedule. Team managers, let the kids lead this. They should be the ones that are answering the questions and just step back. You're absolutely allowed to kind of listen on the sides and see what's happening. There's nothing that says that, but a lot of team managers just stay in their chairs, let this activity happen, and then when they're done, they come and get their stuff and leave. It's really about the kids. The appraisers want to understand from the teams that this is happening. So these are some sample questions that you can run through with your teams to help them prepare. A few things, to think about. So the question of how is this supposed to work? Can you show us? I think that's really important. So sometimes something doesn't work live, right? Your thing fails and it can be really a bummer that you didn't get to properly showcase that during that. So sometimes they might be asked, "Hey, how was this supposed to work?" And they can kind of say, "Well, it was supposed to do this and this is how this worked and this is what it did." And they can kind of walk through that. But they might ask them additional questions about, "Hey, did you design this? How did you think about this? What did you do?" I am going to make the statement that we as appraisers go into this expecting, because every team signed a Declaration of Independence, that everything is 100% team created. However, if interference happened, this is when it's going to come out, because kids in general don't lie. So, "Hey, how did you do this? Like, how did you make this?" "Oh, my dad made that," or "Jim made that," or "somebody made that." And we're not going to be in a gotcha and we're not looking for interference. But if that comes out, the appraisers they're never going to say that's interference, you're getting a deduction. Like, that conversation isn't going to happen. But we are going to ask some follow-up questions to say, "Oh, well, what did they build? Or how did they do it? Did you do part of it? Did they do part of it? What did that look like?" So that we can kind of assess how much extra assistance they got. Because if there was interference and help, then that isn't fair to other teams, and we do need to assess some sort of a deduction. We are not fishing for interference here. We are just truly inquisitive and curious about what the kids learned, how they did it, and what they did. But if interference does come up, we will address it and ask clarifying questions to make sure we understand the extent of that. So definitely you don't need to, I guess, prep your kids on interference, but just know as a team manager, like, if we're asking a lot of questions, it's not because we don't think your team did something. It's just because we want to learn more about it. Again, so we can give your team as many points as possible. Awarding points. All right. So appraisers, when they're doing this, so they're going to talk to the team and they're going to ask them all of their questions. And after that's done, they're going to go back and they're going to score your team. So, our job of appraisers is to award each team as many points as possible. We always emphasize what the team produced, not what they didn't produce. So, every team starts at 0 and they earn points, which I think is an important distinction versus starting at 100 and then getting deductions for everything that they didn't do right. So, we start from the bottom and earn our way up. We have 3 types of scores in DI. So we have objective scores. That is, did something happen or did it not? Did a light turn on and it was supposed to turn on, or did the light not turn off? So it's a yes or a no. If it happened, they get the points. If it didn't happen, they don't get the points. Most of our scores in DI are what we call subjective scores. So they're based on the appraiser's opinions of how well or how creatively your team fulfilled a challenge requirement. So they are opinion based. We have always at least 2, and whenever possible, 3 or more people scoring every element so that we can average this out. But they are subjective. And then we also have 0 scores. The only time your team will receive a 0 is if something absolutely did not take place or did not happen. So if you ran out of time, if something you forgot to do something, if something didn't happen. And if a 0 is given, every single appraiser that is scoring that item has to be in agreement that that item didn't happen. So those are the 3 kinds of scores. DI uses something called a unified subjective scoring. So in the challenge, you'll see that things are worth 10 points or 15 points or 20 points or 35 points. Every score that the appraisers give is on a 1 to 30 scale. And then once it goes into the scoring program, they're scaled to determine how many points that element is actually worth. This is important because then appraisers don't have to like keep track in their mind of, and this is for Central Challenge. Instant Challenge is a little different, but don't have to keep track in their mind of like, is this worth 10? Am I scoring it out of 30? What is this? Everything is 1 to 30. And we encourage appraisers to use their entire range when giving scores. So certainly we want that full range is there for a reason. So appraisers, we provide different kinds of rubrics to appraisers as examples for what they can use to score certain elements. Now, we don't require that every appraiser uses these rubrics, but we do give them and train on them, and especially new appraisers, we do encourage them to use that. We just ask that whatever rubric they're using for the day and whatever method they're using, it's consistent for all teams. So this is an example rubric on the creativity of a solution, right? So you can see in the 1 to 8 range, creativity is present and it's somewhat enhanced. They attempted, they tried. It's solved with marginal addition. And then this 9 to 16, this is where I think a lot of people get tripped up. DI scoring is not like grades in school. 9 to 16, the solution is complete. That is in the 9 to 16 range, friends. So you solved the challenge. I always say if you get 50% of the points, it means you solved the challenge. And the more, the greater, the less, obviously, are areas you might want to work at. And if you want to get down to that 24 to 30 range, that's when we're in wow territory. And the appraisers should be talking about that. And at the end of the day, thinking about how awesome that presentation was. So we encouraged appraisers to use this full range. So if it looked like something was thrown together, it might get a low score. If it looks in that top range, they want to be super, super impressed. And that's a wow. As an appraiser of over 20 years, I still remember wows that I saw 20 years ago. For me, to get in that range, it should be something that I remember for years to come. And that it's really cool and it's really there. So know that we do save those points for the big guns. So anything above 50%, your team is really doing well. But obviously, this is really, I think, good to share with your teams too, especially
Yeah.
between tournaments.
Uh-huh.
We have a question. Okay, no. Because you can make changes and enhancements, right? So you can look at how your team scored on a certain element and then look at the rubrics and think of what you could do to improve those as well. This is another example of a rubric. Some appraisers use this simple rubric. It works better for them. Minimal effort, average, satisfactory, above average, outstanding, right? Similar, different words, but as you can kind of see, these are the ranges that we look at for DI scoring. Integration. So anything that has integration, whether that's every team choice element, integration of the structure testing and weights into the presentation, for example. This is how we think about integration. So I always like to tell teams if you did a presentation and you didn't do that element, so one of those team choice elements wasn't present, if it was a wow integration, it would be so confusing if that integrated element was not included. I need that to happen for everything to make sense. So if you're an engineering team and you're doing your story, but you're not testing your structure and your weights, if you cannot test your structure and your weights and everything makes sense, that's probably not very well integrated. So I think these are really good words to just kind of get your team thinking about as they think about integration. And you as a team member manager could honestly have your kids perform and you could record it on your phone without a certain element. And then the more you miss it, if it's not there, the better integrated it is. Do you have a question? I think I saw something in the chat.
Yeah, the question is how can you use the second type of rubric if it's based on an average? Don't the appraisers score as they go? Thus, there is no average at the start of the day.
No, actually, no. So when appraisers score, we score every single team and compare it to how well your team solved the challenge. We do not compare your team to any other team. Everything is scored as an this team, this challenge, this presentation to how it's solved. And so you won't know how you compare to other teams until the end of the day. So it's not an average, it's not a score. All of that takes place and is scaled accordingly after all teams have been presented. So when you get your raw scores and what the appraisers are putting down are your raw scores, it's how well the appraisers felt your solution met the challenge requirements, if that helps.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add is if more than one person is scoring your team, you will only see an average of all of the appraisers, but it's
Oh, yeah. No, that's
not
fair.
an average, like it's just the average of scores for your team that you'll see.
But yes, we specifically train our appraisers not to compare team one to team two to team three. We train them to score how well a team solved the challenge. Another example on risk taking, in a lot of the challenges these days, there's elements that incorporate risk. So it's important to kind of think about this. I know sometimes it's hard to understand what we're looking for when we evaluate that risk. Um, so you can kind of see some words here, right? 9 to 16, common way, moderately experimented with the unknown and creating the solution. The challenge is used as a guideline for the extent of the team solution. When you get to these 24 to 30 ranges, the challenge is a starting point for an elaborate solution, meaning they've gone above and beyond. They approach it in a novel way. They've extensively experimented with unknown and they've created lots of different things. Overcoming additional obstacles, they've made it harder than need be beyond the minimum, things that they've done there. So definitely if there are risk scores incorporated, a good idea to kind of walk through this and take a look at this as well. And this is how we train our appraisers on how to evaluate risk. Special awards. So each appraisal team is going to, after the presentation, decide how well your team solved the challenge for those elements that they're given, and they're going to award those points and submit those, and that'll be your raw score. If there are teams that go above and beyond and are really amazing in a certain area, appraisal teams can nominate teams to be given a special award. Usually these are in the Renaissance and Da Vinci Award categories for design and engineering or unique approval, outstanding creativity, things like that. I always tell my appraisers if you have to think really hard about whether or not an award should be given out at the end of the day, it shouldn't be given out. These awards should be for that team that you said, oh my God, wasn't that so cool that this person did X, Y, and Z? Right? Or that team did this. I shouldn't say that person. Usually we only give them as team awards. We don't give individual awards. But like if that costume was amazing, or oh my gosh, that technical solution, I've been thinking about it all day. Those are the type of teams that appraisers can nominate for awards. And then if a team is decided once it's nominated and it goes through the awards committee, they'll be given that at the award ceremony as well, in addition to placement awards. So if your team does get a special award, know it's a big deal and they're not just given willy-nilly. We really think that that it was something special that happened and that team deserves that recognition. So raw scores. So again, this is points awarded by the appraisers. And so you're going to get raw scores calculated at the tournament in your central challenge, your team choice elements, except for improv, you only have your central challenge, and your instant challenge. So these are how well the appraisers felt your team solved the challenge. So again, so this is how that breakdown of score, this pie chart represents 400 points. And then, so your raw scores that you're going to get after your presentation, you're going to see they're not really going to tell you how well your team compared to anybody else. They're just going to say the appraisers felt you met these requirements and this is where you're at. So as a general rule, I always say if you get more than 50% of the points from an appraisal team on a specific element, that's awesome. The higher, the better. Anything that's below 50 points might be something, 50% might be something that you work on. Scaled scores, how you compare to everybody else, is calculated at the end of the day. So the team with the highest raw score in each area is given the total possible points. So your team might have gotten a 16 on an element out of 30, and you thought that was really bad, but a 16 might have been the highest score that anybody got all day long. So, just keep that in mind that it's kind of like grading on a curve. So we scale everything, and the team that received the top scaled score based on comparing their raw score to the top score. So the top score is going to get the top points, and then everybody else is going to get a percentage of that. And then if somebody is tied, it's when their total scaled scores differ by 1 point or less. How we scale scores is different. This is in the rules of the road for each type of challenge. So for technical, every single section of your score is scaled separately. So there'll be a top for each of those items. And when you get your scores at the end of the day, they'll be on the website. You'll see how you compared in each of those separate sections. In scientific, in fine arts, and improv, in service learning, all of your central challenge scores, so that 60% of your score, is scaled together. So 240 points, you'll see how you did out of 240. And then for engineering, the efficiency ratio is scaled separately. And then everything else is scaled together. So you'll see how you compared to other teams in each of those areas. And then team choice elements are scaled separately as well. So you'll see how you did in your team choice elements and how you compared to other teams. So you'll see your raw score and your scaled score, and then you'll see everybody else's raw score and their scaled score in each of these sections, if that makes sense. So I'm gonna keep going here because we got a few slides to go. So after your presentation, once your scores are ready, your head appraiser is going to have your raw scores available. They're going to make sure that everything's calculated. If there's zeros, they're going to make sure that we understand why there's zeros so that you, as a team manager and a team, will understand that. So challenge meisters might do a little bit of research, asking appraisers, making sure that they really understand why those items are there. If there's any deductions or anything, that we tie everything back to the challenge and that everything is there. So they're going to go through that and take a look at that. And then you as a team manager, um, for team challenge, so central and team choice elements are going to be available for raw score, can pick up your scores. So one team representative and one team manager can come and pick up those scores. And we absolutely want you to have a team member come because it's their solution and it's really good learning. Unfortunately, the rules of the road says one team member and one team manager, so that's what we have to do. But all of your scores will be emailed to you, so the team will be there. Member will be there as the representation, but then you'll have those scores to share with everybody else as well. Again, these are raw, they're not final, they're preliminary. Generally, things don't change, but if something extraordinary came up during the tournament, something could change, or if there was a mistake that was found or something like that. So the final scores are what's going to be printed on the website at the end of the tournament day. So this is an example of what a raw score might look like. So it's going to tell you for each section the maximum score and the score your team received. So when you get your raw scores, they'll go through all of this and kind of explain any deductions or anything. Again, not going to tell you how you compare to other teams, how you're going to place, but they'll give you a good indication on how your team, the appraisers, felt your team solved the challenge. So definitely encourage you, once you get your scores, to go back to those rubrics, see where you fell, talk about it, debrief with your team, see how you could improve if you're advancing to the next level, and just kind of walk through this and see. Again, these are a lot of subjective scores. But it gives you a feeling they're all averaged by everybody that's scoring the same element. And every appraiser that's scoring that element will score all teams on the day. Deductions. So we don't like to give deductions, but if something happens intentionally or unintentionally as a rule violation, we do give deductions because it's not fair to other teams. So there's three types of deductions. There's interference, so somebody that helped and did something that they're not supposed to do. Illegal procedure, so they disregard or are unaware of a published clarification. If their expense report is like overly egregious, overvalue, and you can't get them to accommodate that, there could be an illegal procedure. A required sequence events happened or not followed. Something weird happens with the challenge site, could happen. Unsportsmanlike conduct generally doesn't happen, but disciplinary in nature. If somebody did something and they weren't supposed to, damage, harassing another team, lots of things like that. Usually we rarely see that because our DI kids are awesome, but there is a route to take that into account if something weird happens on tournament day. And if a non-sportsmanlike conduct deduction happens, it's taken from the team's scaled score afterwards, so it's a really big deal. Everything else is taken on the individual item that happens. Instant challenge, few things in the prep process. So 15 minutes ahead of time to 30 minutes ahead of time, you're going to report there. You're going to wait. It's a few things to just keep in mind. Appraisers are going to be watching for teamwork the minute you walk in the door. So even before they read the challenge to you and look at it, your first impression is a big difference. So you should have your game face on and be ready to go to instant challenge as soon as that appraiser comes and gets you and brings you down and into the room. For instant challenge, it's a little different than team challenge. Appraisers have a specific rubric for each instant challenge for every element that they have to score. So they're going to have that very specifically laid out for how they score each instant challenge. We can also tell when a team is faking teamwork versus working well together. So keep in mind that that will be reflected in their scores. And I didn't talk about this, but I know Elliot did all about instant challenge training, and I also talked about instant challenge a little bit and team roles in some of my new team manager trainings. But consider using team roles if you haven't. There's more in the roadmap about that, just to kind of help your team work through that and be a little bit more structured and organized as you go into that. So this is an example teamwork rubric that appraisers might have for how they might score a team in each kind of area. So things that they're considering for teamwork, something to talk about with your team and think about that. Creative use of materials is often something that is scored in instant challenge. So this is a rubric that might be used for the creative use of materials. Similarly to the team choice element, creative use of materials is here, but just some things to think about as you're going through preparing for tournament. Scores. So your team is not going to receive raw scores for instant challenge until after the award ceremony. And at that point, you're not going to get a breakdown, right? Because instant challenge has to be secret. So we can't really break down the elements and hand that out because we have challenges at we have regional instant challenges that are happening at all our regionals at different weeks. So we don't want that to get out, so teams might have an advantage. So you're just going to see a raw overall score listed. At the end of the day, you're not going to get a breakdown of your instant challenger scores. And teams may receive a deduction if we find out that they've interfered with the challenge or a team manager is interacting or talking during an instant challenge. That could be interference. And if we're found that teams are sharing their instant challenge prior to global finals, teams could be disqualified. So we take that very seriously. Scoring tips for instant challenge. Each instant challenge has its own set of points. Make sure you know what's being scored and are focusing on that because you don't have a lot of time. Know how much time you have left. Teams can't bring a timing device in, but you can ask at any time in instant challenge only. You can't in team challenge how much time you have left. And remember your teamwork. So definitely an example right here. You'd earn 2 points up to 40 total for each full inch of height of your structure. That is important because you could get a maximum points of 20 inches. So if your structure hits 20 inches, you're not getting any more points, right? So your team should be thinking about that and then get to 20 inches and then focus on other elements for getting more points versus then focusing on getting it high. Obviously, every instant challenge is different, but like an example of just as you're practicing instant challenges, know how they're being scored and think about that and have it be somebody's job during the instant challenge to make sure you're paying attention to the scoring and that you're really getting as many points maximized as possible. Final score example. So on the website, something similar to this is going to get posted. So you'll see your top score. So this is an example of the scaled score on the top and the raw score down below. So you'll see how you compared to every other team in each of these different areas. Appeals. So as a team manager, you are an advocate for your team and that is your job. That being said, if anything comes up, we really want to try to time box that and take care of it as soon as possible. So once you come and get your scores, a 30-minute timer is going to start and you're going to have 30 minutes after you pick up those raw scores to raise any questions, problems, or concerns and come back. That is very important. We timestamp when we hand you your scores. If you don't come back within 30 minutes, you've lost your opportunity. We do everything we can as a Challenge Master team to resolve any questions or issues that you have during that time. If we cannot, we do have an independent dialogue process that can happen. And the dialogue team will be then comprised of a tournament director, a challenge master, and another knowledgeable Destination Imagination official. And that dialogue team is final. Things that can be appealed if you get a deduction, if you get a procedural irregularity, so something weird happens that you think impacted your team, a 0 or an objective score that is a 0 can absolutely be appealed. Things cannot be appealed are subjective scores. You might not like the opinions and think they're too low, but it's somebody's opinion. You know, we can't appeal for that. We also are not allowed to take account any recordings, photos, or other images of the team's presentation, and we are not going to entertain questions and concerns about another team. You as a team manager, if you have questions and concerns about your team, absolutely, that's part of that process. And it's there for a reason. So if something is weird or you don't understand something about the scores, if you think something didn't happen, please be an advocate for your team. But as you're doing so, be patient, be kind, be thoughtful. We're all volunteers, we're all humans, and we want to work with you and try to give your team as every benefit that we can and work through this process. There's more about the appeals process in the rules of the road, but if you do have concerns, they can walk, your challenge master can walk you through this on tournament day as well. And don't feel bad if you do need to appeal something. There's a process there for a reason. And sometimes mistakes can happen and sometimes weird things can happen that nobody can predict. So it's there if you need it. I would say likely you're not going to need it. Most of the time, everything is just fine. But please know that your job is to be an advocate for your team. So just keep that in mind. But again, 30 minutes. We don't want this to be happening at the award ceremony or after the fact. It's too late. We want it to happen. Come get your raw scores. And then if there's a concern, we want to address it right away. All right. We are at 8:58, so we got 2 minutes to spare. I want to say thank you, everybody, and then we'll stop this and see if anybody has any questions.